Bob McDonnell right now is doing the Republican response, but I want to talk to Bob Adams, who's a Republican, who's joining us now. Bob, welcome to the Young Turks.
Hello. Thank you for having me on.
No, we appreciate you coming on. All right, Bob, what did you think of the speech? Let's start there. And by the way, Bob Adams is the executive director at the League of American Voters, so you all know.
Well, I thought it was stylistically it was a good speech. I mean, no one's ever doubted that the president gives an incredible speech. He's very good at doing that, no question. But when it comes to substance, there are a number of things that I saw here. One, the president once again believes that government is the answer to all of our problems, and of course that's something that I very much disagree with. And you take proposal after proposal that he put in there, and everything is government stimulating, and government doesn't create jobs. It 9 times out of 10 is the job killer.
Yeah, Bob, that doesn't make any sense. Of course the government can create jobs. If you pump money into the economy, you try to create green jobs, or you just simply give loans, as he's planning to do through community banks, et cetera. There's 100 different ways that that government can create jobs. You might disagree with that philosophy, but it definitely creates jobs. You agree with that, right?
Well, it's not the type of jobs that we need. Let me explain. Jobs that are beneficial to the economy, that keep people working, that grow the economy, or jobs that come out of the private sector. They're jobs that are created by small businessmen who take risks, and that's really where the jobs come from in America. Not just throwing money at projects. That's not the answer here. People need to work, but we need to have jobs coming out of the private sector if our economy is going to recover and become powerful as it once was in terms of economic growth and creating jobs.
Bob,
it's got to come out of the private sector, not out of the government.
That's a tired old argument. So, and I don't mean that's yours is a tired old argument. I mean the argument between us. How much should the government do and how much should it not do? So let's move on to that. The parts of the speech that I thought you should have liked. Okay, I thought he sounded like a Republican president for at least a quarter of the speech, maybe half of the speech. Tax cuts, tax cuts, tax cuts. And he was so proud of cutting taxes and never raising taxes. Sound like George W. Bush to me. I don't think it's the right way to go, and he seemed proud of that. The Deficit Commission, which I think is a ploy to cut Social Security and Medicare. He's circumventing Congress through executive order. We don't get an executive order on any progressive priorities, and this Deficit Commission that the Republicans love gets an executive order. Shouldn't you be thrilled with those parts of the speech?
Well, it's all rhetoric. There's no substance there. The speech really, the substance, if you really look at it, was about government intervention and government involvement in the marketplace, government involvement in the economy. And if you go and look at these proposals, for instance, the community banks for small business loans, you can shovel that money into those community banks, but that's not going to force those banks to give loans to small businesses. It just doesn't work that way.
Well, it can. I mean, look,
again?
It can. Look, if you say to me giving money to banks in general and hoping they lend to small businesses is the wrong approach, I agree with you, okay? That's what we did. And so, by the way, if we're now giving the money to the community banks, why do we give all that money to the huge banks? I thought that was so that they could lend the money. So, I don't mind the community bank approach, but maybe we should have started there. So that leads me to the question of, you say too much government, right? But don't you agree that we have to have government regulation on the banks so that they don't take out-of-control risks that endanger our whole economy?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, some of the big problems that we had was not enough government regulation when it comes to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. That was the government basically not regulating itself. Both of those are quasi-government organizations.
Well, I agree with that. And now, we might have more nuanced debate on what exactly went wrong in Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, but overall, I'm fine with that. So you agree that we need to reinstall the rules about how much leverage they can have, that if they have $1 in deposits, that they can only bet $10 or $12, otherwise we're on the hook when they bet $33, $95, et cetera, as the rules were loosened more and more. Do you agree with that?
Well, not getting into specifics. Yes, I do agree that there needs to be regulation of these huge banks, these huge entities. Absolutely. You can't have the Wild West, and a lot of the problems that we're having in our economy is because of not having the proper regulation in place. There's no question about that. Huge problem up on Wall Street. The other issue that the president brought out that I think is really important to note is this whole question of student loans and how he's going to forgive them after 20 years, 10 years if you go work in something that contributes to public service, no more than 10% of your income, and that's a prime example of how government interference in the marketplace. And trust me, I don't like the student loan industry. I think there's a lot I could say negative about that, but this is a prime example of where the government gets involved. And literally what you're going to have is these student loan companies are going to stop lending because they're not going to get their money back.
No, Bob, I'm really glad you brought that up, and that's a good point of disagreement, okay? Because, look, right now what's basically happening is the government's giving that money to the students anyway, but they're using a middleman of these companies. And these companies charge a lot of money to be the middlemen. And they appear to me to be really fairly useless. Now, if it was the companies themselves that gave the loans, there was a bank that said, all right, well, look, I'm going to give this student loan, blah, blah, blah. But it's actually backed by the United States government. That's why it happens in the first place. So doesn't it make sense to take out the middleman so we pay less and that reduces the deficit?
Well, if you're talking about free education, free college education, if that's the road we're going down.
No,
because everything has a price.
No. I'm not talking about free education, and that's a fine argument to have, but that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying if the government is backing these student loans anyway, why do we go through the middlemen of these companies that then take an extra profit off of it? All right, if we're going to back the loans, let's just set up something that backs the loans without paying all the money to the private companies.
The student loan companies have a lot of advantages that I think are just flat out absolutely wrong, whether it's being exempt from bankruptcy laws, whether it's the heavy subsidies that the federal government and state governments give it. Those are all wrong things, but I think you do need to have someone who manages the process, but it's totally stacked in favor of the student loan companies. Bottom line is that if the government gets involved in the way that the president suggested, you're going to put that whole process, you're basically going to dry up the loans.
No, I don't think so. The government backs the loans, so I don't think it's going to get dried up at all.
Well, they back them in part.
Right. So, all right, so let's move on. We agree and disagree partly there. Look, I want to challenge you about the Republican response throughout the speech, okay? And we're talking to Bob Adams. He's with the League of, he's in fact the executive director of the League of American Voters. Of course, they're a conservative group. The laughing and sometimes what appeared to be a derisive reaction throughout the speech seemed ugly to me. You know what I'm referring to, Bob? Did you hear all the laughter and et cetera throughout the speech?
I didn't see a lot of that. I didn't see many cutaways out into the audience that showed that. I think, that any State of the Union address, you always have, situation, regardless of who the president is. Some people will stand up, some will sit down, some will clap, some won't. Some people will yawn. That happens in every one of these speeches. Is it appropriate? No. What happened, of course, in the president's speech on health care, with Congressman Joe Wilson, I think everyone agrees was entirely inappropriate. But I didn't see anything that was totally out of the ordinary or completely in poor taste.
All right.
But that may have just been where I was watching it.
Okay, well, that's fair enough. I mean, it of course depends on where you're watching it, but I heard a lot of that, and I thought Joe Wilson making so much money off of his comments last year just seemed to encourage that. That was my sense of it, but everybody's entitled to their own perspective, of course. So let me ask you about the last thing that the president referred to, repealing Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Now, that was a campaign promise. Progressives were upset with him that he had taken this long to get to it. Are you on board for that, given so many generals who have said, yeah, we should go forward and repeal that, it doesn't hurt the troops, et cetera, or are you against repealing that?
Well, I would say that what the current policy seems to work. It seems to work very well, and being be in favor of keeping that in place. It seems to work well. What the president's doing, of course, is going to create a lot of chaos and a lot of problems.
Why? What do you mean chaos?
Well, it's going to create chaos and it's going to create problems within the military.
I don't.
And I can tell you that
I literally don't know what you mean. I'm not trying to be, cute about it. What do you mean chaos? What does that mean?
Well, there are going to be a lot of folks who don't think that this is a very good idea, and whether that's right or wrong is another thing. But it's going to create a lot of chaos, and it's.
But Bob, Britain does it. It hasn't created any chaos there. Israel does it with their army, and they seem to have it on lockdown. There's no chaos there, and it doesn't seem to hurt their fighting abilities. So why do you think all of a sudden if we did that, everybody would run out of the army with their hair on fire going, oh, my God, the gays are in the army? I mean, come on. No, you don't really think that's going to happen.
This is all about the president paying off huge supporters to his campaign and to his political backers. That's what this is all about, and it serves no good purpose for the military.
Well,
the military is about fighting wars. It's not about social experiments, and
well, I agree
this has nothing to do with combat and battle and readiness, and that's what the military's first priority is. It's not engaging in social experiments.
Well, you could have said that about including blacks in the army. You could have said that about including females in non-combat positions.
No, it's an entirely different kettle of fish.
But Bob, that's exactly what they said. They said, "Oh, it's a social experiment. We don't have time for it. It's a luxury." Etc. Anyway, look, Bob, I agree with the part where he's doing it because those are the people who voted for him. Well, that makes sense. Okay, they voted for that, and so as a person who's delivering on what he promised, he should do that. But I don't think it messes with the Army, and I've got most of the United States generals on my side. So that's an advantage to me. Doesn't mean we're right, but at least our views are clear on that. I want to touch on one last thing before we let you go for tonight, and we appreciate you coming on and talking to us. Healthcare. So look, I've seen Republicans, Jim DeMint, et cetera, saying, "Oh, Republicans have been in favor of healthcare all along. It's just, we believe in a different kind of healthcare reform." Now, I assume that you're against Obama's plan here, but is there a Republican alternative? If let's say the Senate version that passed dies, are the Republicans ready to introduce something that's really going to reform healthcare, and what would that be?
Well, it's interesting. The president brought up probably the three most populist and popular points on his proposal, which of course is pre-existing conditions, denied coverage, and families that are financially ruined when someone gets sick, and those are all very valid points, and I think they should certainly be addressed in any proposal that the Republicans would put forward. But let's be real: the Republicans don't have a seat at the table. They never have throughout this entire battle over health care reform, and health care reform. The program that the Democrats have put forward is far more than pre-existing conditions and denied coverage. It's about Medicare. It's about the cuts to Medicare, and that's why my organization has opposed it vehemently. The $500 million in cuts to Medicare,
let me ask
rationing that inevitably would come from that. So that's why we have opposed it.
All right, Bob, so let me ask one question about that then. Look, first of all, I disagree with you that the Republicans never had a seat at the table. The most important thing was the Senate Finance Committee, and even though the Democrats have an enormous advantage in that committee, they actually eliminated that advantage and negotiated with the Republicans for months on end with just 6 senators, 3 Democrats and 3 Republicans, and they got nothing to show for it. The Republicans have been completely obstinate on this. But my question to you, that's my opinion, my question to you is on Medicare buy-in. You say you're for protecting Medicare, and I read an article that you wrote about that in Florida. So I assume that you're definitely in favor of Medicare buy-in then, which was the latest proposal that Howard Dean and the Democrats liked.
No,
but you love Medicare.
Not.
Why wouldn't you want Medicare buy-in?
Well, first off, it's going to dilute. It's a step towards national health care, for one. It's putting more people into the Medicare program, a program that's already on the verge of bankruptcy already.
So you don't like Medicare?
So there are many reasons why the League of American Voters, including myself, opposed the president's health care proposal. The $500 billion in cuts to Medicare is one of them. if you put those,
but wait. Are you in favor of Medicare or against it? I don't get it, because you're complaining about the $500 million or $1 billion in cuts to Medicare, but at the same time saying, all right, great, let's support Medicare, let's expand it by doing a Medicare buy-in. And you say, no, Medicare is bankrupt and it's terrible and we shouldn't expand it.
Well, the program needs to be reformed. There's no question about it. But going in and cutting out $500 billion in funding is the wrong way to do it, and going in and adding even more patients to the Medicare system is the wrong way to go about doing it.
Well, first of all,
it forces the program to bankruptcy even quicker.
No. First of all, that $500 billion goes to private corporations. Medicare was working fine before we instituted that program, which was a Republican program, to, of course, funnel more money to insurance companies, right? And so that's the waste. Look, that reduces our deficit. You should love that deficit reduction, but shockingly enough, again, on the side of private corporations there. But if you like that you want to protect Medicare, there is no good reason to be against Medicare buy-in.
There's plenty of good reason to be against it, because it'll force the system needs to be reformed. The Medicare needs to be reformed, no question about it. But dumping more patients into the system isn't the way to do it. And going in and cutting out $500 billion in funding is definitely not the way to do it. You can't cut $500 billion out of Medicare without decimating.
It's not cutting it out of Medicare. It's cutting out the private corporations that are, again, being the middlemen there. And you know that. That's why the Republicans have always been against Medicare, and they've never voted for it. They've never been in favor of it. And all of a sudden, the only reason you come to the defense of Medicare is because of the corporations making money off of it.
No, that has nothing to do with it whatsoever. Absolutely nothing to do with it. My concern here with Medicare is the effect that it's going to have on those who are elderly and those who are disabled who rely on the benefits of that program. And
I'm going to try one last time.
You cannot go in and cut out $500 billion.
So you want again? I'm going to try one last time. So you want to protect the senior citizens because you think Medicare is working well for them, and you don't think it should be cut. Okay, right?
I don't think the program's working well. I think there certainly needs to be reform, but I am adamantly opposed to cutting out $500 billion in funding for Medicare.
Okay, so again, you want to keep as much money in Medicare as possible. So why, if it's working well for the senior citizens, and you want to keep as much money in there as possible, why not expand it so it could work well for others?
By dumping more patients into the system, you're going to be diminishing the benefit to the seniors who are in that program, and you push the program to the point of bankruptcy.
No, but those people bring in money. They pay premiums. They pay premiums. It's a Medicare buy-in. They pay premiums, so they actually bring in more money to the system. They're not necessarily taking out. Of course, they will when they get sick, etc., but they pay into the system, whereas the senior citizens now are not. They paid into it through taxes, etc. So I don't think that's a defensible argument. But, hey, look, that's why we have these conversations, and we air out both sides. And I really appreciate you coming on. Bob Adams is with the League of American Voters, and it was a good conversation. Thanks for doing it, Bob.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
All right.
Watch the live show at theyoungturks.com.